Well, look at that. She's finally home. Look at this shot. I mean, I love how there's almost absolutely zero dialogue in that ending scene of the episode. It's just a bunch of establishing shots for Dragonstone. And the final phrase comes from her when she actually is ready and she says, "Should we begin?" So it's all about her processing this return home, and a lot of the emotion is just kind of left up to the music in this piece. It's great. We find out, all right, that Dragonstone is essentially built on a mountain of dragonglass, which automatically ties Daenerys to Jon, because in the same episode we have Jon telling his people, we gotta find some dragonglass. So once the two meet, or at least begin to communicate with each other, if Daenerys approves, Dragonstone will be turned into a mine. Look at the type of architecture that they use for these dragon heads here. Like, it reminds me of something from like back in the day with the Aztecs. We're about to find some Aztec gold in this place, which is completely fitting because in this episode, Jon actually says that as of right now, dragon glass is more valuable to us than gold. This was a pretty solid setup episode, which in theory is what the first episode of the season is supposed to do. And one of the first scenes we see is like the army of the dead, the White Walkers coming towards us. The Night King there leading the charge, and then we see all these kids, all these people that have been turned to White Walkers, and we see these giants, right? And I know I should technically like be terrified and excited about this, but literally the only thing I could think of when I saw this for the first time was try and recognize some of the faces to see if I could find Hodor somewhere in the crowd. He has to be somewhere in the crowd there, unfortunately. Anyway, we start off with Arya, right, posing as Walder Frey, and it's a slaughter. She basically kills off all of the remaining Frey, and I love how she leaves the maidens alive and tells them, okay, I need you alive because I want you to convey a message. Tell people that the North remembers and we don't take prisoners. Winter came. She's heading south to try and kill Cersei, which I thought was surprising because I just assumed that she would probably head north first. But yeah, she's going to King's Landing and she bumps into this group of people, right, that I'm pretty sure she might end up being forced to kill eventually, but at the same time, I think the scene does a pretty good job at establishing how great the situation is. There's good people on both sides. Those soldiers are just trying to do their job, following orders, and they left their families behind to do so. Also, thanks to the preview, I'm pretty sure that next week we're going to see Arya reunite finally with Nymeria, if that really is Nymeria, because she looks kind of intense. We also learned that Bran is kind of omniscient now, or at least he's been able to unlock that omniscient ability. So, he gets through the wall, he's safer than he was before. And one of the things that I think really ties this episode together is the similarities between the scenes at Winterfell and the scenes at King's Landing. Because it's basically both of these people, well, Cersei and Jon, but also like the people surrounding them kind of scratching their heads and going, okay, we need allies. What are we going to do? We need to build forces for the threat that is up ahead. The problem with Cersei is that she doesn't trust anyone, versus the problem with Jon, as kind of stated by Sansa in this episode, is that he's too forgiving. So you see both of these dynamics come into play. Like Cersei, she invites the Greyjoys over, Euron Greyjoy. He has a fleet of 1,000 ships, and even that's not good enough for her. She's like, no, I still don't trust you. You killed your own brother. And then in this very weird line that Euron has, I don't know if it's like intended to be for some type of foreshadowing, but he's like, you should try it sometime. It was good. It felt good. If I were Jaime, I'd probably just get the hell out of there as soon as possible. Anyway, before Euron leaves, he says, I'll bring you back a priceless gift. In my opinion, the only thing that you can offer Queen Cersei that she would consider to be a priceless gift would be somebody's head. A head of somebody that she hates. So maybe he's off to go and find Tyrion or something. Other than that, though, I kind of felt like the scene with Cersei and Jaime when she's standing on the map kind of felt like a big, huge recap. And it's funny because really the conclusion of that recap is everybody hates us. She says, like, I'm the queen of the seven kingdoms, and James like, correction, 3 at best. So it's like, nobody will add us on Facebook, what do we do? I also like how Jon says that he's going to put the women to fight as well, because they can't defend the North with just 50% of the population. So that's pretty cool. Brienne and Lyanna Mormont are up for it, obviously. Then you have the internal sibling conflict friction rising between Sansa and Jon. And I have to say that it's this weird situation where I kind of agree with both. Now, to be fair, both of these characters now have more power than they ever had in their entire lives. So it's okay. Let's see how heavy this power ends up being for each of these characters. How does having this power test both of these characters? Because like Sansa kind of like says, Joffrey would just hate when he was questioned and stuff. And so she wants to have more of a voice, but then he doesn't want to be undermined. And I think like if this was just like a deal between them, then they could resolve things, eventually things would work out. But then you have the shot of Littlefinger here smiling in the corner. And the problem with that though is that this is kind of like the look that he gives people when he's just like, yeah, I got you now. I planted that seed between you and Jon, and now this whole thing's gonna kind of collapse from the inside out. It's kind of like it's like in his mind, he's like, mission accomplished. Then again, Sansa is a lot smarter than she was before, so have to give credit to that. I mean, in this episode, she even tells Jon, I love Ned. I miss Ned and Robb, but they made stupid decisions. I mean, I'll just say this, like, I think Ned was honorable. Robb, I think, is an idiot, or was an idiot. So I'm glad that she brought that up, and she's like, you need to make smarter decisions. And then Jon calls her out and says, how am I supposed to do that? By listening to you? Shots fired. I guess I just really don't like them fighting. Like, I don't want them to keep fighting, because if we do end up getting a Stark family reunion, it's not going to be much of a reunion if Sansa and Jon hate each other by that time. We go to Old Town, which was another location added to the opening. Actually, the twins, Dragonstone and Old Town, were added to the opening sequence. So we go to Samwell Tarly, and the first part of that sequence was just disgusting, man. Like those bowls of like food and no, it was gross. I was watching that, and I literally kept thinking to myself, this scene better pay off in some regard, because this is gross. It's disgusting. Later on, we see a naked old man, which was, also, you saw the thing, right? It's kind of like those weird situations in which you know that you don't necessarily want to see something, but then you end up looking at it anyway because you're curious. So anyhow, the good news is the sequence absolutely paid off, because not only do we find out that Dragonglass is in Dragonstone, but also Jorah is there, and we don't know how long he's been there for, but you can tell, like, there's been a time skip because Gilly's kid, I think he's at an age where he begins to talk. He's a lot older now. Also, the grayscale on Jorah's arm has pretty much consumed all of it. And I have faith that Sam will, in fact, be the one to find the cure to grayscale. I personally think that the antidote to grayscale is going to be a derivative, something based off of Dragonglass as well. Just something to do with Dragonglass, because if you remember, Stannis' daughter had grayscale and she was cured. We don't know why, but I believe she was living in Dragonstone as well. Get to the Hound and the Brotherhood without Banis. Beric Dondarrion is there, and they go into a familiar place. This, if you don't remember, I believe it's from season 4, when Hound was, on his adventures with Arya. And they go, and the Hound pretty much steals this man's money. And back in the day, the Hound's logic, when he saw those two, was like, they're pretty much goners anyway, so I'm gonna steal something, because it doesn't really matter. Like, they're dead anyway. And Arya's like, no, that's not right, or whatever. We find out that eventually they did die because they were starving, and they just decided to, the dad decided to take a knife, and, So that happens, and he basically questions Derek, like, what's the deal with you? Why does the Lord of Light bring you back? And there's some pretty good quotes here about religious questioning. One that stood out to me was when the Hound says, if your God is so powerful, why doesn't he just straight up tell you what he wants from you? And also by the end, when he's, he digs a grave, at least for the kid, which, by the way, I think that's a shout out to the Hound gravedigger theories, right? And so he buries her there, and he just gives a speech, kind of just throws away the formalities, and I'm sorry this happened to you. You definitely deserve better. And even before that, there was an argument with Beric when he says, divine justice doesn't exist. If it existed, you'd be dead and they'd be alive. But anyway, in terms of the story moving forward, I definitely think the most important scene of that sequence is when he's staring at the flames, and he tells the other two what he sees. And based off what he saw, basically states that the White Walkers are going to come through Eastwatch, and which actually was mentioned in the episode in the beginning when Jon was telling the wildlings, we need people in the castles, and we need to send people to Eastwatch because that's on the other side, close to where Hardhome was. So we need people there, and the Hound pretty much just says that's the point of entry for them. So once the wall collapses, and it will, you could definitely expect that to happen in Eastwatch. So we'll be getting the Battle of Eastwatch pretty soon. But anyway, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel because I'll do reviews for Game of Thrones every Sunday night. After the episode airs, comment down below what did you think about it. Like I said, I thought it was a pretty solid setup episode, just to get the wheel rolling for the season. One is on top and the other's on top, and on it goes. So thank you so much. Catch you guys later. Bye.